Welcome everybody, it's Dr. Vibe, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles and a solution for someone's problem. Hope everyone is safe during this interesting and historic time in Black Canadians' journeys. Hosting another conversation on behalf of UNDPAD today. We have a special guest, but before we go any further, I'd like to have Richard and also Robin read out the statement. So Richard, if you could start with the statement, that would be fantastic.
Will do. Thank you, Dr. Vibe. This is the Decade for People of African Descent, speaking truth to the Black settlers' experience in Canada. Our significant presence and contributions on this land predate the country of Canada by over 150 years. Indeed, up until 1961, over half of all Black people in Canada were Indigenous to Canada. Indigenous settlers to Canada includes your ancestors. Learn of that. Our sweat, skills, experiences, and contributions taken and used without our consent and for free built and shaped early Canada. Learn of that. For example, Lynn Jones. She has undoubtedly pushed and carved Canada into the powerful promise that it is today. Learn of that. People of African descent are resilient, brave, spiritual, and master builders who have been central to the campaign for equality and an equitable Canada. The new goal is African Canadian truth-telling. Starting today, learn of this. Thank you. Over to you, Robin.
Okay. Notre présence au Canada et nos contributions importantes à notre patrie précédant la formation du Canada de plus de 150 ans. En fait, jusqu'en 1961, plus de la moitié des Noirs vivant au Canada y étaient nés. Les pionniers du Canada incluent nos ancêtres, sachez-le. Pour bâtir le Canada et le façonner, on a profité de nous en utilisant notre labeur, notre compétence, notre expérience et notre rapport sans nous rémunérer, sachez-le. Par exemple, Lynn Jones a beaucoup aidé à bâtir le Canada qu'on connaît et sans aucun doute collaboré au renforcement de la structure du Canada très promoteur d'aujourd'hui, sachez-le.
Thank you very much, Robin and Richard. Oh.
No. Just there was some sound there. Les personnes d'ascendance africaine qui sont résilientes, braves, spirituelles et constructives ont joué un rôle crucial dans la campagne prônant l'égalité et l'équité au Canada. Notre nouveau but, raconter l'histoire véridique des Afro-Canadiennes dès maintenant, sachez-le.
Okay, now I know you're done. Okay, thank you so much to both Richard and Robin for reading out a very important statement. And I just want to thank everyone. We've got some people who have just come into the conversation. I'll repeat again, please put yourself on mute unless you have something you'd like to contribute to the conversation. And again, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time off on a Saturday afternoon. I know we're most of us inside most of the time, but you could be doing other things, maybe sleeping. Well, I'm glad you're not sleeping. I'm glad you're here this afternoon. So let's get to the conversation topic for today. Yes, we're going through the C crisis right now. I don't like to say that word because I hear it all the time if I turn on my television or radio. But what are the effects to our Black Canadians on this when it comes to anxiety, emotional challenges during this time? Well, we have the perfect person to bring onto the conversation today. It's Lesline McEwan. Let me read a little background on herself before we have her come to the stage, digital stage. Lesline McEwan is a registered psychotherapist with the College of Registered Psychotherapists of Ontario. She did her graduate degree, a master's in individual counseling at St. Paul University and the University of Ottawa, and her undergraduate degree, BA, with a double major in psychology and religion at Carleton University. Man, do I feel undereducated already. Lesline is a member of the Ontario Association of Mental Health Professionals. She's a workshop, seminar, facilitator, and presenter. In addition, she's a Certified Anger Management Facilitator accepted by the Children's Aid Society, and the courts. With over 20 years of counseling service, for the last 7 years, she has provided therapy solely by video or telephone. She is in private practice doing individual counseling with adults, addressing anxiety, depression, anger, grief, etc. She also provides service through major EAP companies. That's, if those who don't know what EAP is, means Employee Assistance Program. She spent many years in the federal public service and survived, working in various departments, including the Treasury Board. Her last public service job was at the Supreme Court of Canada as a program manager. Well, let us welcome to the platform Ms. Lesline McEwan. How are you today?
I am doing great, thank you.
There you go. Good to see you again, and how are you keeping during this time?
Well, been following instructions and trying to keep safe.
Okay, well, fantastic. Well, thank you for the time, and I want to get right into our conversation. And the first thing I'd like you to share with our audience is, what actually is anxiety?
Good. So again, thank you for hosting me again. And before I go any further, I just want to give this little disclaimer. This is for educational purposes, this session. It's not clinical and it's not therapy or counseling. So I suggest, if someone may have any concerns about themselves or someone they know, that they contact their doctor or a mental health professional.
Well put.
Okay. Now, anxiety. We're living in, unprecedented times. I see this time as a paradigm shift. And when there are huge changes, there's anxiety. And so in a nutshell, anxiety is a part of our survival instinct. When we're faced with threatening situations, our brains and our bodies respond by going into safety mode. And then our adrenaline starts pumping and we're prepared for defense. And in a nutshell, that's what anxiety is. It's far more complex, but that's a simple way of explaining it. Now,
go ahead.
There are people who suffer from anxiety, and that's a different subject. However, people who struggle with anxiety and panic attacks at this time in these stressful situations, it might be enhanced, and people who normally are not anxious might find themselves being anxious, and that's okay. It's not the end of the world. It's something is happening, and we are responding emotionally and physically, and that's a part of being a human being. So that's all right. Now, we don't have the uncertainty adds to it. We don't have a GPS. We don't have a roadmap. We can't say, this is going to be better tomorrow or the next day. So what we're doing now is taking it one step at a time, 1 day at a time, 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time. So that's the best I can suggest, Now, how would one recognize if they're experiencing anxiety? And again, I said anxiety is normal, and we all experience anxiety at some point in time. You're going for a job interview, you get a bit anxious, facing a new situation, you get a bit anxious, and that's quote unquote normal. Now, how would we recognize if we're, getting anxious at this time, especially if you're not someone who struggles with anxiety? There are some physical sensations. So you'll find yourself with increased heart rate, palpitations, shallow breathing, hyperventilating, stomach aches, headaches, butterflies in the stomach, and a host of other physical symptoms. Now, how we might find ourselves behaving with anxiety, we might be, withdrawing. We might be talking really fast, be jittery, avoiding situations, find ourselves sweating unusually, trembling, being weak, can't concentrate, having trouble sleeping. Those are some of the behavioral signs we might see. And in terms of the feelings and the emotions, you know, worried, apprehensive, fear, dread, panic, those are things that we should look out for. Or if we find ourselves experiencing it, acknowledging it, it's okay. Now what do I do? Because it's not the end of the world. These indicators, they cause us to pay attention that something is going on. These are the signals, like I said before. The cues, something is going on, what do I do? You know, there's the term, the fight or flight syndrome. So this is what it is now, a perfect example. What do we do? You know, do we run or do we fight? And of course, you know, we have to stand still and fight. And by fighting, I mean, what am I going to do to get myself, or what are we going to do to get ourselves through this situation? Yeah.
So I just want to welcome it. We have some more people coming onto the call. So Lesline, do you want people to ask you questions at the end or during the conversation? What is most comfortable for you?
You know what? Both is fine. During the conversation might be more immediate, you know, I can.
No. So I'm going to start off then. I have a first conversation piece. What is the history with Black Canadians in general in regards to anxiety? You know, are they willing to admit that they're going through it? Because you have the evaluated experience. So I'm just wanting to know, curiosity wise, we as a people, historically, have we dealt with it?
Generally, no. There is a taboo about anything that has to do with our mental health. And my motto is mental health is not mental illness. And so whenever the topic of mental health, where anxiety is a mental health issue, people automatically, you know, shrink away from it. The taboo that is in the society, what are people going to think? What are people going to say? And, you know, we don't talk about it. So they suffer. And by doing that, you know, you would find cases where there is excessive use of drugs, alcohol, and other substances where people try to self-medicate. Another big taboo is, we know our community is very spiritual. And in a lot of cases, mental health issues or mental illness is viewed in a negative light in a lot of religious communities. And that's another reason why it's hard to face.
Okay, anyone wanting to ask any questions at this present time? We have some more conversation pieces that Leslie's going to address. Anyone want to ask anything? And if you are on phone, please text the following number, 416-717-3535, if you want to join the conversation, or take yourself off of mute.
Yeah, Dr. Bob, I got a question.
Go ahead, Robin, please.
Hey, Leslie, thanks for being here. I wonder, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the idea of, so given what's going on with the pandemic right now in terms of Black folks, I would imagine that some of the main things that are causing anxiety are the fear of becoming sick or dying, either ourselves or loved ones, the possibility of losing income, and the possibility of getting unfairly targeted by enforcement measures, such as the carding that the Ontario government has brought in. So if you could comment on that, that'd be great.
Yes, that's true. And the fears are what plays into anxiety. Now, in terms of, you know, getting carding and that type of thing, here is an opportunity where it can be ramped up. You know, what are you doing on the street? So there is that part, but I don't know how qualified I am to go too deeply into that. But the fears surrounding housing, my job, my health, What am I going to do if I get sick? If I die? Who's going to take care of my kids? What about my parents? All those things are major stressors that will contribute to anxiety, especially that we're already starting off at a deficit. Most of the, how would I say this, low-paying jobs or the risky jobs, there are a lot of racialized people in those jobs. So they still have to be going to work. I mean, there's a lot of racialized people in the healthcare community. They still have to be going to work. So there's that risk, and then there's that worry. And, you know, do I quit my job? What do I do? And then, of course, that's another subject. There's homelessness, you know, the extreme poverty. How do I stock up? Do I have money to buy, you know, toilet paper? Or, you know, there's not money to stock up. People have to go from day to day, for my next paycheck. So there's all that extra, there are all those extra factors that adds to the anxiety.
I'm just saying, in regards to this question, when should one see a doctor when they feel they're feeling anxiety? Is there characteristics?
Yes, and let me not forget the word racism. It contributes a lot to what's going on, and I'll just leave it there. Now, when do I see a doctor? If your anxiety is starting to impede your day-to-day life, seek help. Speak to a mental health specialist and get some treatment that will help you to manage your symptoms. If you're worrying too much, if you are feeling depressed, because anxiety and depression, a lot of times they go hand in hand. If you find that you're drinking more, using drugs that you never used before, or maybe increasing your usage, if you have suicidal thoughts. So basically, if it's impeding your day-to-day life, it's time to see a doctor.
Good. Anyone else have any questions at this time before we move on? Okay. Chime in if you have any in real time. So Lesline, I want to have you share with our audience, live or replay wise, some anxiety management techniques. What are some things that one can do to minimize the effect of anxiety?
So I'm going to speak about some physical anxiety management techniques. Deep breathing is number one. Don't underestimate deep breathing. Whenever we're anxious, we breathe shallow and short. We hyperventilate. And in order to counteract that, we need to do some deep breathing. That is going to relax our bodies. And so deep breathing is number one. I know most people on this line probably already heard of it or know how to do it, but deep breathing is going from your belly, not your chest. When you're deep breathing, sit straight, put your hand on your tummy, one on your chest, and you inhale through your nostril, and your tummy or your belly should be extending. It's like filling up a balloon. And then once you do that, then you exhale through your mouth. So you inhale through your nostril, and if say you inhale, you count to 4 while you do it. And when that balloon is full, you hold it for about 3, and then you exhale through your mouth, and then you count to 5 or 6 when you exhale. That's where the relaxation is. So that's one technique.
Okay. Any other suggestions? I have another conversation piece I want to bring up in light of that. So I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So we're talking about if one is suffering from anxiety, but what about the case for friends and family who have a loved one that is going through anxiety, whether it's at this time or outside of this time? So
it's basically you're saying, how do you support someone who is going through. If you know some techniques, you can try to walk your loved one or your friend through some of those techniques. Or you can speak to that person and try to calm their fears. Another good technique is distraction. It's not the answer, but if someone is feeling really anxious, you call a friend, you speak to them. If you know that you have a family member or someone in your life who's anxious in this time or any time of stress, you call that friend, speak to them, keep in touch. So instead of that person sitting there and getting lost in their anxiety, they can speak to someone and be distracted. And of course, there are support lines that individuals could call, the Distress Center, there's a Canada Mental Health Line. So there are resources. If you can't do it, point them to the resources. Some of those, which will be on a handout for later, to be on the website.
And I want to just continue along that path. So during the current situation, there may be times with you have a family or someone or a loved one that's going through this and you can't see them. So what do you do support-wise? What can you do for self-care if you are not able to communicate or be in the same physical space at all with that person? Because obviously you're going to go through a lot of anxiety. What can one do to lessen it in that situation, if you have any suggestions or hints or top suggestions, by the way?
Right. And, you know, you used a very important phrase there, self-care. Because in all of this, we have to put ourselves first. And if I have someone in my life at this time, I mean, we're all separated now physically anyways, but the way to connect by phone, social media, whatever. And if I can't, I could get in touch with someone who can. Have someone check in virtually by phone. But the key is to take care of self. Because if I get anxious about the people around me, I won't be able to help them. I won't be able to think, to concentrate, to have a good plan to say, this is what I could do, or these are the resources that are available.
So I'm pushing you to ask some questions and make some conversation. Rob,
I got another one.
Go ahead, Robin. Robin, take charge.
Hey, Lesline, can you talk a bit about the difference in terms of dealing with anxiety related to stuff that we can control versus just stuff we can't control? So for example, stuff like obviously we can't control if we lose our job, but we can control, well, obviously one of the biggest, like I mentioned, one of the biggest anxieties obviously is around getting sick, and we do have some control there, but just kind of, can you talk about the difference again between, you know, handling anxiety that's related to stuff we can control versus stuff we can't?
Right. And that's a difficult one for most people because we like to be in control. We like to know what's next, what's the answer, what can I do to fix it? And in most cases, and in this case, I mean, it's out of our hands. However, we may not have control over the whole situation, but we do have control of something. I don't have control over what's going on in the atmosphere right now, but I do know the protective steps I can take. And the phrase I like to use is, I cannot stop the rain, but I can pick up my umbrella. Or I can put my rain boots on or my raincoat. So there are things we can't control. So what we have to do is in those situations, look for the areas where we have some control, and that will lessen the anxiety. I can't see my parents, but I can phone them, or if they're tech savvy, I can FaceTime them. You know, so there's some control in the midst of all this uncertainty.
Thanks, Rob.
Emmanuel here, if I can ask.
Go ahead, Emmanuel.
Okay, Lesline, thank you so much for making the time to educate us all today. One of the things that it's happening that every week that's becoming evident is that we're heading into, unfortunately, more and more loss of life, and the issue of bereavement and really being there for people who are going to experience challenges in our communities would, unfortunately, will be more and more needed as we go forward. So what are some things that community such as ours need to pay attention as we prepare for the coming weeks? When there is, we're hearing now, this is close and personal, yeah? We're hearing of friends, colleagues, you know, neighbors that are losing people.
Yes, yes. We are expecting, you know, a lot increase in the need for grief counseling. But at this point, again, it comes to staying connected, supporting each other. Just as, you know, 2 months ago, if someone had a loss, we'd be there for them. We would be, you know, bringing some food, visiting, comforting them, whether personally or on the phone. Now we still have to do that, but we have to do it in a virtual way. I can't take some food over, but I could order something and have them do, you know, drop it off on my friend's porch. So still have that support. Because even now, when someone dies, people can't even go to their funeral. So it's quite, you know, it's a huge shift. So we have to be creative and find ways to show love to each other.
Which is very difficult for our communities that are so connected and social. And okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Manuel. Great question. And Lesline, it's interesting. I was actually listening to NPR radio, was it yesterday, and they were interviewing a family and also a funeral home about the experience of doing a virtual funeral. And it was very challenging for the family to handle that, but it's the new reality, at least for now. Those things are going to happen. So I think, yeah, Emmanuel, like great question. And also Leslie, thanks for that response. Leslie, we're talking a lot about the effect of this situation on Black adults, but what about the effect on Black children?
Yes, children. And a lot of times children gets forgotten in the chaos, but they're affected just as we are. Their lifestyles have changed, their routines have changed. There is so much that have changed for our children, and we need to be vigilant of that. I'm not a child psychologist, I work mostly with individuals, but kids are fearful and they're anxious and their behaviors will change. And as parents or caregivers, we have to be vigilant and we have to support them. I know right now parents are stressed, caregivers are stressed. A lot of cases, people are cooped up in the same house. And it's quite challenging. Some people are working from home and they have to be dealing with the kids. The kids are anxious, they're trying to adjust to this change. And it becomes could have a bit of tension, I might say. So we have to look out for the kids when they get anxious. There are going to be behavioral issues, Some kids may get a little clingy, because we have to remember that in all of this, we have to create new routines. And in order to feel, quote unquote, secure, we create a routine that works for us, where children have to depend on us constructing their routine to make them feel safe. So we have to make sure we explain to them in their language, at their level, there's a change and what's going on, create their routine, help them to understand what's next. You know, they get up in the morning, you know, you fight to get them off to school, they're off to school, they have their day, they come home, now they're up and they're home. And generally for kids, being at home all day means it's holiday or a PD day or something. So it's how do you get them to adapt to that new routine, where being at home also means being at school. You still have to do your studies online, or if parents are homeschooling. So it affects them, and we have to, you know, be gentle and be kind with them. don't try to start introducing major behavioral changes consequences at this time. Be firm with them, but also be understanding, because they're suffering as much as we are. It's just that they don't have the capability to express, in a lot of cases, how they're feeling. Do some positive things for them.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Robin, you're up again, and then after that we have Richard. So Robin, go ahead.
Actually, so Lesline, so what you said about, especially in our communities, that the whole issue of anxiety is so taboo. What advice would you have in terms of like us reaching out to people to try to, find out if they're experiencing anything and get them to talk about it, when given that it's a taboo subject? Like you always, I guess you don't just call and go, "Hey, you feeling anxious?" So what kind of language would you suggest in terms of, how do you handle that?
Yeah. So, you just the way you would check up on your friend, and you call. First of all, if someone is exhibiting anxious behaviors, there's some way you might know. The person might be speaking really quickly or loudly, or they may be complaining, I can't take this, and, I'm so fed up, and those type of languages. So when you call and if you say, "Hey, how are you doing?" Or "Are you doing well?" Or "How are you managing?" And sometimes you might even want to get specific, about things. How are you managing with the kids at home? Ask those type of questions that will give you a hint of what's going on with them. And also too, because people are a bit anxious at this time, doesn't mean they're suffering from anxiety.
Mm. But what about, I can see we all have that knee-jerk reaction. How's it going? Oh, good. That's going to be the first thing out of so many people's mouths. And how do you, if you sense there's something else going on, how do you go deeper?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so our people, you don't want to pry too much, right? On the other hand, if somebody's like, "Oh, everything is fine," you could do you have enough this? How are you getting on? How are the kids doing if they're kids? How are you managing if they're, cooped up by themselves? Who have you been talking to? How, what have you been doing? Ask questions without trying to pry, because you're not saying that they're not doing fine, because there are some people who have really strong coping mechanisms and they're fine. And of course, there are, most of us who, "Oh, we're fine, all is well." So you know the people you talk to. So you can sense when something is off, and depending on the relationship, you know how deeply you can go, right? Do you have everything you need? Is there something I can do, I can help with?
Yes, thank you, Lesline. I just had a quick question about all of these social platforms. I have been spending, I think, all of my time since this crisis broke on Zoom and Skype and Microsoft this and that, video conferences, and I have never seen so many people coming online. What do you think about all these people using this platform as a way of connecting, or is it something that people, do you think that it's a good thing, or do you think that it's something that kind of is replacing the need for us to get together? What are your thoughts on the use of these online video chat things?
Yes. Right now, it's an alternative, eh? And I hope, and I'm sure, well, I'm not going to say I'm sure, after this is over, individuals are going to be so happy to connect personally. So this is a way of connecting. Like for work, we have to work and we have to do it virtually. So it's, there are people before who used it too much and it was distancing. But in this case, it's more of a getting together. It's drawing us together, because without it, then we wouldn't be able to communicate and interact. So it's a good thing, in this situation, but it could be not so good in, you know, quote unquote, normal situations. But I do see this continuing in the future, that there's going to be people using more and more of these social platforms to communicate, to have meetings, etc. Myself, as a psychotherapist, right now, 100%, at least for the past 7 years, 100% of my work has been online. I use Zoom, I use BlueJeans, I use WebEx, that's how I connect with people across the country and even outside of the country. And of course, I do some by phone. And it's worked very well for me there. And of course, there are the people who, if it's not face-to-face, they have nothing to do with it. But now they're coming to me on Zoom because they don't have a choice. So.
Robin, you've got a comment, then we've got a question from Sophia. So Robin, go ahead.
Yeah, comment on that topic. And I'll try to keep it short, but so I'm reading a massive book right now called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. And basically, it just talks about kind of the business model of Google and Facebook. And as we all know, right, it's basically their model is, hey, you know, we're going to track what you do online and we're going to send you targeted ads, right? So the original idea there was, hey, you know, we're just going to observe what you're doing and then we'll, you know, target better ads at you. However, as you also know, Google and Facebook are public companies, and the pressure on companies like that to continually grow and increase revenues is massive. So of course, when you think about it, so the idea of predicting, like targeting ads is kind of like, hey, you know, Dr. Vibe did this in the past. We predict he'll do this, so we'll send him an ad, right? But that's not profitable enough. So they're now moving into a next logical step, which is that, you know, instead of predicting what you do, we want to shape what you're doing. And this isn't new. They've been doing this for the whole kind of gamification thing. All that to say, though, that this goes back to the kids online, particularly now, like even before this, but especially now with so many people online, it's a particularly important time to see what they're doing because, again, these companies are now moving into this high, basically this thing on steroids, right, where they need to shape behavior to make sure that to make it absolutely predictable that where people are going to buy more stuff, right? And in terms of and the part of the reason that they're getting into stuff like Google Home and all that kind of stuff, the voice, right, that with a recorder, it's because your emotions are in your voice, and they want to understand emotions, and it's like, and this is now also not a new concept, right? That they, you know, advertisers have been targeting lonely housewives for a long time, but we're in a different environment now in terms of their level to do that and the way they do it. So just kind of, this is a words of caution.
Well, just to build on to that before I get to Sophia's question, I was speaking this morning with a very close associate of mine, and him and his wife run a very highly visited website. I'm not going to give any more details, but in the last 2 weeks, they have been bombarded by gaming sites to do advertising on their site now, because no one's going to those casinos anymore or any like gambling. So all the gambling companies are trying to inundate websites that are highly visited to get that advertising because they're losing revenue now. So there a lot of the, how can I say, a lot of the vices in our lives are going to go full-fledged on digital right now to get attention, to get those people who are usually doing it face-to-face to do it online. So just want to build from what Robin said. There's a question here from Sophia. She's saying, I know some workplaces have EAP. How do they work? Are they obligated to tell their employer that the staff members are accessing this help? Is it confidential? Lesline?
Yes. Yeah, the EAP service is confidential. And we have understanding that we read to our clients at the beginning where we don't share information with third parties. And it's not just the EAP, it's through the EAP, but it's counseling. And counseling is always confidential. We don't share information. There are cases where it's not, but that's, you know, a way extreme. And if it's not, they wouldn't already know that. But it's completely confidential. We never communicate, and I'm speaking as counselors, we never communicate with employers, not the company through whom it comes. So whatever we discuss, it's between the counselor and the client. If the client would like information, for example, we give it directly to the client and they would take it wherever they want. We don't support things like court or, court cases and that, so we don't get into that. But it's completely confidential, of course, except where the limits are. And that's by law, danger to self, others, children at risk. But yes, it's confidential.
Okay, thank you. I've got, so we got three back to back here. So first up, Sonia Clark is asking, can anxiety cause migraine headaches?
I'm not going to say it causes migraine headaches, but anxiety could cause headaches, yes.
Okay. Next up, we have Adia, who has a question. So Adia, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, just going back to the idea of having therapy, there's a lot of people in our community who are very adverse to that idea because they have no idea what to expect. Can you just give us a description of what someone might expect at the experience that they might expect to have at a therapy session, and really sort of also how to look for a therapist as well?
Okay, so first of all, looking for a therapist, you look for a licensed mental health professional, whether it be a social worker, a psychotherapist. They have a professional college that they're registered with. That's the first thing, because one of the problems that I think it still exists, there are a lot of people who call themselves counselors, but they're not registered, they're not qualified. If they mess you up, you can't sue them, it's all over them. So look for someone and check their credentials. If I say I'm a registered psychotherapist, you want to know if I'm telling the truth? You go to the CRPO site, you search my name, you will see my name and you will see my credential number and you will see if I'm in good standing. So if you're ever seeking a mental health professional, make sure you do your due diligence. Now, as for what do you expect when you go to see a therapist? We all operate differently, but it's basically the same. First thing we have to understand is we all need help at some point. Generally, our community, our elders, somebody might be able to help, but there are issues where maybe you might not want to talk to them about, or they're not qualified to help you. So you go to a therapist, the first thing, you're going to have a discussion with that person. Generally, you talk to them on the phone and see if you're a good fit. Is this person what I'm looking for? Do I feel like they understand where I'm coming from? And I always tell people, if you find a therapist and you're not satisfied, don't quit, because every therapist is not the same. And I'm not saying they're good or bad, they're just different, and it might not be a good fit for you. So find another one, don't give up.
Adia, do you want to add to that? Anything else you'd like to?
Yeah, did I answer that?
Yes.
Go ahead, Adia.
Okay, can you just give us an example of what types of questions a therapist might ask someone in a session? You know, what does that sound like when they're coming to you?
Yeah, that's a difficult question to give any specific answer to. But once someone enters, you do what's called an intake. So you find, you get their personal information, age, etc., and then you discuss what brought them into counseling. One of the questions they might expect to hear is, why did you seek counseling? What prompted you to reach out at this point? And that would be a beginning.
Just taking a look. So I just want to catch up here on some comments because there's a lot of them coming in. Sylvia is saying in Nova Scotia, we have a 1-800 number set up by the Association of Black Social Workers as a free support for community folks. She also says, I feel that there are a lot of inspirational comments, pictures, and clips that ask we share. I feel pressure to share and guilt if I choose not to share. Interesting. Mm-hmm. And also Karan is saying, asking here, the children will often show attitudes and behaviors of the parents. Any tips in this current time as to practical ways the parents can continue to demonstrate calmness and hope to the children?
Yes, that's true. Children, you know, their behaviors are always reflective, mostly reflective of what's going on at home. And, you know, we talked about how do you as an individual care for yourself and try to keep your anxiety in control, manage your anxiety, because the calmer we are, the calmer the children will be. And that's one of the things I mentioned earlier was you have behavioral consequences in place, be firm on those, but don't start adding new ones because these are unusual times for all of us.
Okay. Robin?
Yes, Lesline, what tips would you give to people to try to figure out for themselves whether their anxiety is the normal kind, so to speak, as opposed to the abnormal kind?
Yeah. Okay. So anxiety that may need, you know, consultation with a medical or mental health professional. And some of those I mentioned before. Are you sleeping? If you're losing sleep, you can't sleep, you can't concentrate, you can't make decisions, you know, you can't take care of your duties, your family, you're very, I say short, impatient with your kids, those type of stuff, you know, is it affecting my daily life? Am I noticing changes about myself? Yeah. You know, am I yelling at the kids for no good reason?
A question here from Sophia is asking, have you seen a major spike in calls for your service in these recent days of COVID-19?
No, it's the same.
Okay.
What we are expecting is that as time go on, then we're going to have a flood of calls. Because usually in times of trauma and disaster, people are in that self-preservation mode, survival, that they're busy looking about the immediate things that need to be dealt with. So they're not calling in right away, but afterwards, when it's settled, that's when individuals will start calling in.
Anyone
That's
else?
usually the experience we have had in the past, eh?
Yeah, that's interesting. You think at this time you'd see an increase in the number of communications.
And one thing we have to remember is that anxiety was already one of the premier mental health issues.
A great question here from Emmanuel. He's asking, what about newcomer parents who have linguistic and cultural barriers? Any tips of how we can help?
And there again, it comes to community, right? It's community. And somebody in those areas who works in those areas, you know, newcomers, and if they're in touch with those individuals, they can guide them as to how to reach out. Again, it's staying in contact with each other. And if I know somebody that I think might have a barrier, something like being a newcomer, it's my responsibility in this time to reach out to that person and see how I can be of help. So again, it comes to community, staying connected.
Okay, excellent. Karan in saying, here in Manitoba, there is a service available. Oh, I lost it. Just give me a second here. Here in Manitoba, there is a service available to residents for the current crisis. So I know we're doing communication right across Canada, have people on from many provinces. Do see if your province has a helpline in regards to anxiety. And if you can, contact us at the UNDPAD website, through the UNDPAD website, and we can put that information on the website. I think that'd be a great great thing to list those resources for Black Canadians. So, any other questions before we start wrapping up the conversation? Yes, the website is www.undpadpush.com. For those who are watching this live via the Zoom app on whatever digital device, the link is in the computer on the chat room right now, or in the chat room. Anyone else have any questions at the moment? Okay, so we're going to start wrapping up. Oh, we'll get to how we can get a hold of Lesline before we wrap up, most definitely. So we have two people to wrap up. First of all, we'll have an update from UNDPAD from Richard Sharp. Richard, go ahead.
Thanks, Dr. Vibe. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes, yeah, okay, good. So again, thanks, Dr. Vibe, for hosting this show, and I'd like to do the thanks of the Dream Legacy Foundation and Meeting of the Minds, and Andrea Pierce, who has been one of my partners in crime in the UNDPAD work for helping make this stuff happen. Again, UNDPAD Push is focused on working with governments to ensure that the commitments that they make to Black Canadians are followed through and that we actually do see results. We've been pressing for these results for about almost 2 years now, a year and a half now, sorry. A lot of the information in terms of our engagements can be found on the UNDPAD site. However, since the COVID-19 crisis, we've shifted from engaging on strictly trying to get institutional and systemic change in support of Black Canadians within the context of the UN decade. We've shifted towards asking the government and stakeholders to support Black communities directly with respects to responses and coordinated responses around COVID-19. Emmanuel sent around a note, and I think others have also sent around a note from leaders of Black healthcare, from Black healthcare community, which basically says that there are a number of reasons for us to be able to assume and understand that the Black community will be disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Our people are risk being decimated because of all of the reasons that have been stated even on this call in terms of our already being in a disadvantaged place with respects to food security, mental health issues, housing and homelessness, issues around education, policing, and so on, and the list goes on. We've been raising these concerns with our federal and provincial leaders. We have not received much in terms of concrete responses. We've received the speaking points that the Prime Minister and other politicians give, and the government seems very happy to speak to the general messages that they're giving to other communities, even though we know that the government is making special allocations and monies available to Indigenous groups, to LGBT groups, to women groups, to certain shelters, but our communities are not being adequately addressed. So we've again in fact, there was a call last on March 29th with a number of federal leaders speaking to Black communities. Interestingly, the minister responsible for family and housing and youth was absent, and he was supposed to be our champion. But none of the federal leaders spoke to what specific actions are going to be done to support Black communities. So we have heard, so that's a bit disappointing, but we continue to press because we have no choice. There are lots of billions of dollars being spent and thrown around. Many of our people were concerned will not be able to access these funds and resources. We've again shifted a bit, not just to talk to government, but to talk to organizations that are large service organizations that we believe will be called upon by the government to engage our communities directly. So instead of the government engaging our communities directly to provide sort of disbursement of funds and resources for people who can't get those funds through the regular means, they're going through we believe that they're going through larger organizations like the United Way, perhaps the YMCA, and perhaps even the Red Cross. So the UNDPAD Push has engaged these organizations directly, asking for a meeting, asking them to use a Black lens in the work that they're doing to support our call that there needs to be a specific focus on our communities so that we are not left behind during this unprecedented crisis. And again, that information will be found in terms of that correspondence will be found on the website. We are also engaging other members of parliament that are not part of the ruling government, the ruling Liberal Party, to ask them to support our efforts in the House of Commons. Again, where all of these monies and funds are being dispersed without limit. It's interesting to note that many of the things that we've been calling on, and we were sort of fighting and scrapping for $25 million in capacity monies, and capacity that we believed that could have helped us and our community organizations and non-governmental organizations in this particular crisis. But because that $25 million didn't move for various reasons, we're now seeing that we're not able to respond to the need that is now presenting itself with respects to COVID-19. And that in itself is a disappointment, and to some extent, I'm hoping not a tragedy in the making. Lastly, I wanted to say again, thanks for the work of Meeting of the Minds. There's a meeting that's coming up next week that will be sharing the information on our website and also sharing information through our various networks. NAPSI for the survey on the non-governmental, non-for-profit organizations, so that we can better articulate in dollar terms what the needs are of our Black nonprofit organizations, and the ongoing calls that are being led by Emmanuel almost weekly now to support the nonprofit sector. BBPA, the Black Business Professional Association, has a town hall tomorrow, again, using this platform to, again, push and engage our communities on a number of, on some of this work. The Black Lives Matter and their campaigns for funding, the 613 Hub, Black Hub, 819 Black Hub in Ottawa is also following suit to support Black communities and individuals who are directly being impacted by COVID-19. Again, I'd like to thank you guys for your ongoing support. For the volunteers that have reached out to us over the last, since the last meeting, we are going to follow up with you. We just were overwhelmed with some work over the last week, but we definitely would appreciate more support for the work that we do. And again, thanks again for this call and all the people who are participating. It's always great to engage with you guys, even if it's from sort of far away. Thanks.
Thanks for the update, Richard. We've got actually, there's one or two more questions we have in the queue. Lesline, do you have a few more moments?
And I have a few more comments too.
Absolutely. So there's a question here about other modalities. So you know what? Here it is. What are some other modalities one could use to help articulate their feelings? Feelings can be difficult to express with words.
Mm-hmm. So, you could express yourself through art, for example. If expressing it, I take it you mean you'd like someone to know how you're feeling, or is it, I just want to be able to express it? You could journal, you could, do some art, play music, if you're musical, a musical instrument, find creative ways. What's your creativity? You could express yourself through those means.
Okay. Robin, do you want to do something quick here? I see you have a message in the chat. If you can make it quick, that'd be great.
Yeah, so just to mention a campaign we're involved in here that relates to mental health and COVID. So this we being the 613-819 Block Hub that Richard and I co-lead. So we had an incident on Friday where a school trustee, a white woman, confronted a young black man who was playing basketball by himself on a basketball court. He had searched out a basketball court by himself, confronted him, said all sorts of nasty stuff to him, made some racist comments. So we are now working with the boy's father to on a campaign. And sorry, and this is not the first time this woman's done this. She has a history of doing these kinds of things. So we have a campaign going to get that woman to step down. So what I am going to share actually with Dr. Vibe after this is a petition that we have going. And I raise this in terms of, you know, I myself actually suffer from depression and anxiety, have for a long time. One of the things that has really helped me was are things like this, right? Being involved in the Black community, kind of that feeling that that collective effort. So hence, part of the reason that's why I'm going to share the petition we have going to get this woman to step down, and I hope that you know, all of you will sign it.
Thank you, Robin. A few things, I guess. If you have any closing comments, the time to make them happen is now. And how can people get in touch with you?
Okay, so before I get there are some things that are important at this point, and I already alluded to, like staying informed. Stay informed. Don't overload yourself with the news. Not everything that comes on you have to see. Get your information from credible source. Limit your consumption of news, because I can't turn on the TV or anything where I don't hear, I'm going to call it the C word. So don't overload. Just if you need information, get it from credible sources. I'm not saying that you don't inform yourself, but limit what you take in. Stay positive. It's important to stay positive. When we're stressed, you know, we avoid doing things that we enjoy doing, but do stuff that make yourself happy. The other day I saw my daughter and doing, I think it's some online dance party or something of that nature, but stay positive and do things that are pleasant. And most importantly, stay connected. Please stay connected. Important, have a routine. That's fundamental. Keep a routine. You don't want everything to fall in chaos. Have a routine. This is what my day is going to look like. And just to touch a little bit back on kids, you know, I mentioned that children will have changes in behavior. You might even find a child who wasn't wet in their bed in a long time. They might start doing that now. They'll get clingy. You're trying to work and they're holding on to you because they're uncertain too, eh? So we have to remember that and try to be kind to them. All right. Now, did you say, how do people contact me?
How can people get in contact with you?
Okay, so my website is LCM Counseling. That's counseling with 2 L's.com, or just Lesline McEwan.com. And my contact information is there, and my phone number is 613-216-2498.
Thank you so much for sharing. I see in the chat, Sylvia Paris is saying, and I'm going to put this out to the audience, and if you can put in the comments or send your response through the website. Would you find it useful to have a once-a-month conversation in regards to anxiety/mental health? We'd be more than happy to host it, but we do it on your request. So if you want to put your comments now, whether it's in the chat room here on Facebook or via the UNDPAD site, let's make it happen. So I think, Richard, you have one more comment, please, and then we'll close it down.
Yeah, just to echo what Lesline is talking about in terms of using the Zoom platform for things that are not just about work. That dance party that you saw your daughter on was something that my wife has been coordinating for the last couple of weeks now. That happens twice a day, at noon and at 7:30. It is fun. It is eclectic. It is joyful, and it is ways in which people can connect without having to, not around work, celebration of life. So I can share that through the network for those who are interested. It's a small group, but I think it's the kind of thing that can be quite infectious and can grow, and is good for the soul. So thank you.
That was really good advertising copy there, Richard. Yeah, you know, that's a good promo just on the go like that. You got a side hustle going on or something?
Oh, I'm learning from you, man. I'm learning from you.
Okay, so
also, Dr. Vibe, just one more comment here, just writing on what Richard just said there. A very important piece for our community is the spiritual siding. And now people are unable to go into their places of worship, but there are a lot of places of worship that have gone online. So that's one way of keeping connected. Look at it. On a Sunday morning, you could sit with a cup of coffee in your nightgown and be listening to your pastor or whoever your spiritual leader is, right? So, and if they haven't gone online, you can encourage them. And other groups too. We all belong to groups of different sorts, and it's good to be in touch. Encourage them to go online because it's not difficult.
Excellent. That's great. Andrea, it's your time. Take yourself off mute. Still on mute.
Tell Mom on the phone. She's on the phone.
Okay, well, she's still muted.
You're still muted.
We can hear you.
Okay.
Oh,
So
yeah.
what I want to first is thank Lesline for this wonderful session and volunteering her time. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate the value of your time. The UNDPAD Push Coalition would also like to thank Richard Sharp for tirelessly working always and missing the dance parties that his wife organized on Zoom by being on the conference calls. I also want to thank Sharon Fletcher from Blacks Inspire. Of course, Emmanuel for tirelessly, particularly now during the COVID crisis, leading the discussions to support our nonprofits, who is a big part of the backbone of our community, along with our faith groups are bundled in there. Sophia Jacobs from Black Ottawa Business Network, and also Nadine Spencer from Brand EQ and the BBPA, because she's the one who's donated her time and her resources to always update our site and to do all this stuff for free. So I want to thank her for always being responsive and doing that for us. So, and thank you guys for your attention today. We really appreciate it. And the UNDPAD Push Coalition would like to call on you that when we're ready to ask for your support, to advocate, if you have conversations with the United Way or Red Cross or your MPP, bring up these topics, because we're the one, you know, this is what I say, that we're already in a leaky boat that's being torpedoed by COVID-19. And we all need to survive this. And the one way we're going to do it is to do it together, because it doesn't seem like the government or anyone else really cares about us. So we need to care about each other. We need to bring, I firmly believe that the Black community has everything we need to not only survive, but thrive. If we bring our individual ingredients to the kitchen to bake a good cake. So let's bring our ingredients. We need you guys, not only here, but to follow up with your MPs and various organizations, like Robin is saying, the petitions, all these things we need to do to let our voice be heard. And the UNDPAD Push Coalition is here to support you in that, but we need you to support us as well. To work on your behalf, because government respects unity, they respect the voice, and if we're divided, then we're gonna be in the same position we always have. Unity strength, so let's keep staying united.
Thank you, Andrea. And again, can you just give the website address, please, again?
It's lcmcounseling.com.
And also the UNDPAD from Andrea.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm going to repost it.
No, say it verbally.
UNDPAD Push. UNDPADpush.com.
Thank you so much. Well, we're going to end it there, folks. I'd like to thank everyone who stopped by for whatever amount of time. It's appreciated and not taken for granted. I'm Dr. Vibe, host of the award-winning Dr. Vibe. So I'd like to show, and I'd like to just say, everyone stay safe, stay safe. Can't say it straight today. Stay safe. Been on too many of these calls, but never enough. And please reach out to everyone and see if there's a person today you haven't reached out to. Reach out to them. God bless, peace, well, keep the faith, and have a great day, everyone. And we will be back soon with more conversations. Keep your digital eyes open. More to come. God bless.